Our goal is to reach the top, and Cloud9 is on the way. Winning against them would give us an extra chance to reach top 2.
다음 경기가 어떻게 보면은 2등 결정하는 경기가 될 가능성이 높으니까 이겨야 되죠, 웬만하면. 저희 팀도 경험이 많은 편인데 그쪽 팀이 좀 더 많지 않나. 어떻게 보면 두 팀 다 어떻게 보면 새로 리빌딩을 했고 이제 서로 이제 리빌딩에 적응하는 과정인데 저희 팀도 그때에 비하면 엄청나게 많이 깔끔해졌다고 생각하거든요. TSM도 많이 나아져서 사실 어떻게 될지 잘 모르겠어요.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Week 6 of the North American League Championship Series. Now, last week we passed the midpoint of the split, and every game counts as teams battle for a shot at playoffs and a Las Vegas final. Now, it's a beautiful day for League here in the City of Angels, thanks in part to Cloud9 Jana, who's forecasting a great day of action. Up first on the Rift, though, is Team Dignitas. Here they are, arriving at the studios just a short time ago. They'll be taking on Energy in our first game, who you see here talking shop and preparing their strategies. Now, it's an important game as Energy look to stop their slide in the standings and reassert themselves amongst the rest of the teams. Well, thank you for tuning in. I'm James Das Patterson. Great to have you with us. And joining me on the analyst desk, as usual, Aiden Zyrene Moon and Joshua Jat Leesman. And, of course, returning to the desk is Isaac Azael Cummings-Bentley, joining us again from the Riot Playtest team to help us explore the patch changes. So welcome back.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it wasn't my choice to have you back, but you're here nonetheless, so...
You did have a choice? Would you?
Of course I would.
Oh,
he's an endless wealth of knowledge.
That's all I needed.
Exactly. All right, well, on the menu for today is a full plate of League of Legends. Our afternoon special starts with Energy Esports versus Team Dignitas in Game 1, followed by Renegades and Immortals. Then we've got a classic matchup of the two winningest organizations in the NALCS, TSM versus Cloud9. And we'll wrap up the day with CLG against Tip and Liquid facing off against Echo Fox. Before we hit the teams, though, let's take a step back and talk about the environment that they'll be playing in. This week, teams are competing on patch 6.3, which carries some changes that could impact pick and ban phase. I want to start with that Kog'Maw that we've seen in a couple different regions so far.
Yeah, well, we actually saw 6.3 in the European LCS, even though Kog'Maw saw play on patch 6.2 over in Korea before these massive buffs. And when we saw him in Europe, I'm actually very surprised he made it through the ban phase so frequently because he is so powerful when he is standing still. But the problems that happened actually when some teams picked him is they picked him in compositions where he actually had to be very mobile, like a super hard initiate, and they forgot that Kog'Maw can't move when he's actually dealing damage. So they actually needed to learn a little bit better how to abuse his absurd power.
Yeah, and you definitely have to play around that window because the stark contrast in his power when the W is up and when it's off, and you have this 7-second window afterwards, is where you need to exploit him. But also you need to play around that as a team. Yeah. You can't go in after that's down. So I saw some teams fall prey to that, and that's why it's that 50% win rate right now, despite it being a very powerful pick.
Right, you have that, the W, the importance of both knowing how to play around it, against it, and with it. And too often we saw teams hard initiating, leaving the Kog'Maw behind, or he's unavailable to put in the kind of DPS he needs. Yeah. Thoughts on Kog'Maw?
Yeah, we definitely also saw, some of the weaknesses of Kog'Maw, like just as far as the pro teams being organized enough that they can do these coordinated dives onto Kog'Maw and erase him right at the start of the fight. So the champion certainly isn't without weaknesses, but in its moments of power, it's exceptionally strong. And I think especially when you do have comps drafted around it, like if you can get Lulu, if you can get John, if you can get the tools needed to protect this champion, it's incredibly powerful. Mm-hmm.
Right, no doubt he's been wrecking solo queue left and right. We'll see if he can do that on the NALCS stage. Another champion that I want to talk about who saw some buffs, Gragas. Now, I mean, this is no stranger to the LCS or professional play in general, but he's back.
Yeah, I think that Gragas, really all he needed was a little bit of a bump on his clear speed. The change on the W, making that AoE, really did help him get through that early jungle a lot faster. It helps him keep pace with these other fast junglers. I mean, we're seeing a lot of Nidalee and things like that. And when the Nidalee's doing their first gank or getting to your buff before you've even cleared the way there, it's it's really tough to compete. But with the W, clears a lot faster, and then also the Q for disengage as well as for ganks and chasing people down, the 2-second slow is huge.
Yeah, the 2-second slow is immense. And when I play Gragas, it's just that's the biggest difference that I feel when I play him. And now you have a versatile build too. Runic Echoes is fantastic on him. If you're ahead, you can go and just snowball the game from there. And then if you're behind, you have a Cinderhulk build. And once again, you have another disengage/engage jungler, and I want to see more of these come back. I'm a little tired of the 80 carry junglers personally because I feel like these are how you start those fights and how you close games out.
You mean you're sick of seeing 580 carries per game? Oh, who would have thought? Now, somebody who is a bit more of a stranger to the jungle but has rose to prominence here in Korea and seen a little bit of play in Europe. Rumble, Jat, talk to me about this.
They should be using a different skin, for one. But with that, Rumble and jungle needs to be happening. The thing with this is it was a bit of a surprise, but it does make sense. In the current lane swap situation, the current power of Runic Echoes, Rumble can speed farm the jungle for the first 4 or 5 levels, and oftentimes hit level 6 before the top laner would anyway. So that level 6 power spike of Rumble is sometimes even reached even more quickly from the jungle, and against those double marksman teams that you're seeing laying down the ultimate on the backline or with physical damage, it's good in those situations too. But it is a little bit weird because the early ganks aren't great.
Yeah, that's what I really love about it is the fact that when you get to that level 6, you're able to catch multiple backline AD carries. And as for the skin, I think a lot of people actually use the Super Galaxy Rumble because the auto attack isn't that one where you're just like, it's more of a thrust and it's easier to read. So
that's an interesting, I'm not a Rumble player myself, so I wouldn't necessarily know the differences between the skins, but it is pretty interesting how auto attack animations can have a big role in choosing whether or not to play the champion.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, you know, part of the reason we're seeing him in the jungle is because the champion is still really strong, but in the top lane he has a lot of these bad matchups, I think. He's kind of struggling in that, and this allows him to kind of, like you said, get some level 6, sometimes a lot faster even than the top laners in competitive because of the lane swap. So he's able to avoid the bad matchups, he's able to hit his power spikes, get level 6, get Runic Echoes, and be extremely impactful in these team fights.
So talk to me then a little bit about the health of pick ban phase, right? Since we're seeing these 3 champions kind of come in to mix things up, we've also seen a couple nerfs go through as well. How do we expect to see these champion selects change?
Yeah, in terms of the health of the ban phase, I actually think we're going to see an improvement there. I think some bans have been freed up. Graves, Ryze, and NA, we really don't like Quinn too much. I think we're more favored towards that Fiora right now. So really only Lulu, Poppy, GP, and then there's a couple there that I think you really have to ban now. Kalista will probably jump up that list, but now you have more options. You have more available spots. I think that teams are each going to figure out what we really want to grab first, and then blue side and red side now actually feel like they have more freedom in their pick ban, and they can have more strategy in the ban phase.
I'm really interested to see how Kog'Maw is going to play into that as well, because like Jat talked about, you know, we did see Kog'Maw get through the ban phase a lot in Europe. You know, he was banned out a couple of games, but you know, the teams are obviously confident that they could deal with this champion. So it'll be interesting to see, are people going to try to ban out Kog'Maw, or maybe just try to ban out what they think works well with Kog'Maw, leave him open, and then try to exploit his weaknesses.
And also just how many power picks are also flex picks, which sometimes limits strategy in Champ Select, but then we have someone like Kog'Maw, who is not really a flex pick in his current iteration, changes things. Because if you have a team composition with like a Lulu, a Lissandra, a Graves, a Corki, like we can put anyone anywhere if we really want to and throw in a Rumble and maybe throw him top lane or jungle. It makes it really hard to counterpick against, which increases the probability that you take a high-profile champion right away.
Really? Okay, but why? Explain this further. Then you don't. For sure. Because then you're showing your hand. If you take
because if you
or you meant high-profile flex.
If you take a Lulu, a Graves, or a Corki early in the draft, you're not telling your hand anywhere because you can still put them anywhere you want.
Sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you were pointing towards a champion like Kog'Maw, who would be considered high priority, but tells me exactly what you're trying to do.
That's where it's going to be interesting.
You trying to tell me that Kog'Maw can't go jungle, Jat?
Hey, I've seen it, and I've been.
You get Krugs, and you just stun everything with your W. It's great.
Okay. All right, good. I'm glad we had that clarification. Now, for our social media question, we want to extend the analyst desk conversation to you at home. What picks do you think will have the greatest impact on patch 6.3 and why? Tweet your thoughts to us, and we'll check back later in the day to read some of your responses on air. Now, let's take a look at how the teams are currently stacked up. Immortals is at the top of the table, while TSM has secured themselves sole possession of second place. Tied for third are Cloud9 and Counterlogic Gaming, and one win behind, tied for fifth, are Energy Esports and Liquid. Team Impulse has an extra win over Team Dignitas and Echo Fox, who are tied for 8th, which leaves Renegades at the bottom of the standings. Now, the top 4 teams are starting to set themselves apart, but there are still lots of jockeying to be done for positions and teams that are kind of sitting in that bubble around the playoff positions. I want to look first at Echo Fox. They had a fantastic 2-0 week last week against Team Liquid and Team Impulse. Do we expect this run to continue?
Yeah, I mean, Echo Fox looked really good last week. Froggen especially, I think a lot of people were really impressed with him, with his return. And this week is a big question because it's kind of like proving that last week wasn't a fluke, right? Can you actually compete for a playoff spot? Can you, stay out of the bottom and prove that, hey, we deserve to be at the top of the standings. The only reason we weren't was because we didn't have our whole team. So this is a big kind of like proving grounds for them, I think.
Specifically, the teams they're playing against this week as well, sitting at 4-6 and 5-5, and Echo Fox being at 3-7. Wins there immediately put you into the playoff picture, or at least one game out. There's a chance that if they win both of their games, they could actually be the 6th place team after this week.
Right, yeah,
so
these are teams close in the standings. They're definitely competing with each other for those playoff spots. One of the teams in which they are competing for, possibly competing against, Energy. Now, they need to fight to get back into this because they have been looking to slump in the last week or two.
Yeah, they look out of those top 6 teams in playoffs right now. They look like the one that's sliding the most, and Echo Fox could actually take their spot here. And they play a team that's below them in the standings and one directly above them. So this week is going to be a little bit season-defining for them because if they go 0-2 again, it could be a spiral that ends up making it so they can't really get their footing before the end of the split as Echo Fox is surging up. That's if that happens, but I do think that Energy have a lot of problems right now. I think the communication is now coming to fruition now. We're not fruition, but we're seeing the communication issues, and we're seeing that Moon and Kongquan, these guys who are supposed to be the core of the squad, aren't really enabling GBM, Alltech, and Impact to really play their game. It's kind of locking them down.
Yeah, we've seen Impact relegated to champions like Maokai, whereas we saw the Fiora earlier in the split and the kind of dominance that he could display on a champion like that, but more recently relegated to strictly engaged champions.
Yeah, I mean, his last game, he was 0-6-2 on Maokai, and not only is that champion, I think, like not that super strong in the meta right now, it's very much that kind of supporty, tanky role, right? You use your ultimate, you kind of like protecting your team with that, you have the W, but besides that, this is not a champion that's going to carry the game, and especially not when they're like not giving any of the farm to him, right? He got way behind early, and then they basically said, okay, just kind of deal with it. They gave all the side farm to GBM, to Alltech, and they're not really, like, Alltech has not been doing enough with the farm, right? So
yeah. And coming into the year, every team had like a ceiling and a floor. And Energy had a really high ceiling because of the talent of the players on that roster, but they're hitting the floor because of all the potential problems coming to fruition. Their communication is bad, Impact can't find champion pool, and they are currently riding a 3-game losing streak that they need to turn around against Team Dignitas. Otherwise, they'd actually risk falling out of the playoffs, which is not what that team wants when you bring in Impact and GBM.
Yeah, a lot of problems to fix if they want to make it to playoffs and then consequently push towards MSI and Worlds. Speaking of which, this week we announced the location of both the World Championships and the Mid-Season Invitational. May 4th through the 15th, the World will gather in Shanghai for the Mid-Season Invitational. Spring split winners from each region and a wildcard team will meet in China to do battle in a double round robin for regional pride on the international stage.
And I'm really excited for this. It's going to be a 2-week MSI, so after the group stages, you're going to have a lot of time to prepare and get that tournament meta down as you come into that last portion of it. So I'm really excited for what's going to happen at MSI with those #1 teams.
Yeah, kind of putting some space and some breath into that tournament will really, I think, foster some better competition. And then, of course, you've got to look forward towards Worlds. Also announced this week, North America will play host to the 2016 World Championship. As the month-long tournament hits cities across the United States, the road trip starts in San Francisco, continuing on to the historic Chicago Theater, and then to New York's Madison Square Garden before returning to Staples Center in Los Angeles for the final showdown. That all takes place from September 29th to October 29th, so mark your calendars and keep an eye on LoL Esports for ticketing information.
Yeah, the 2013 World Championship was in Korea. The Korean team won. 2015 World Champion. It's 2014. 2015 was in Europe with 2 European teams making the semifinals. Now the 2016 Championship in North America. What could happen, We're going to make it out of groups?
Maybe we'll make it out of groups. Yeah. One can hope, right? One can hope. The home crowd will be cheering hard for them to move from San Francisco to Chicago. At least, please, for the love of God. Anyway, now it's time to send it over to the caster desk to bring us into Game 1.